Black youths, behold your legacy. Your ancestors laid the foundation of civilization in Africa and spread it around the earth when black men ruled the world.
What is Africa to me? Copper sun or scarlet sea? Jungle star or jungle track? Strong bronzed men or regal black? Women from whose loins I sprang when the birds of Eden sang. I'm LeGrand H. Clegg II, and the poem I have just recited was written by the brilliant poet County Cullen. Decades ago, when this poem was first published, most people knew very little about Africa, which was then referred to as the Dark Continent. Today, things have not changed very much. In newspapers, magazines, and on television, we learn of the famines, wars, and racial unrest that have plagued parts of this great continent. Yet, even when Africa is granted prominent news coverage, few journalists have taken the time to reveal her great and ancient past, probably because they too know little about it. For many years now, it has been clear that despite the fact that the evidence exists, the academic establishment has largely ignored the contributions of people of African descent to the evolution of civilization. As a result of this, a number of distinguished scientists, scholars, teachers, ministers, school boards, and others have sought ways of teaching black history and culture to an uninformed public. Since the late 1970s, many scholars, including Dr. Yosef Ben Jochanan and Dr. Asa Hilliard, have led thousands of people, mainly black Americans, to Africa and have focused their tours on the Nile Valley, especially Egypt. We wish that we could take each of you to Egypt, Nubia, and other parts of Africa so that you too could benefit from such a direct experience. Although this is not possible here and now, we invite you nevertheless to join us in an exciting journey into the black past. We plan to take you first halfway around the world and then millions of years back in time. We want you to learn of the rich heritage of people of African descent. So fasten your seatbelts and prepare for a fascinating expedition into antiquity. Many people who seek to rediscover the ancient black past begin their search in Cairo, the capital of Egypt, which is the gateway to Africa in general and to the Nile Valley in particular. Today, Cairo is a bustling city with a population of about 6 million. The people who live there and in most of the remainder of Egypt are very different from the ancient Egyptians. Today's inhabitants are largely Arabs whose ancestors originally conquered Egypt during the 7th century AD. According to many authorities, the Nubians, who are generally darker than modern Arabs, are the descendants of the original Egyptians. Most Nubians live in southern or upper Egypt today. Here we see African-American Egyptologist Ashra Kwesi talking to some Nubian gentlemen who live in Cairo today. For over a decade, Mr. Kwesi has joined Dr. Yosef Ben Jochanan in bringing hundreds of people to Africa and conducting tours of the great monuments of Nubia and Egypt. We shall consider the Nubians at some length later in our journey. Modern Cairo is like many other major cities. It has fine hotels, skyscrapers, and traffic congestion. This great city lies on the Nile River, and no trip to Egypt is complete without a cruise down the Nile. One of the greatest attractions in Cairo is the bazaar or marketplace. In many of the bazaars, one may find clothes, perfume, jewelry, and artifacts. Although Cairo and other modern Egyptian cities are exciting to visit, the focus of our journey is on ancient history. So, just as Alex Haley, the distinguished Black American writer who also unearthed his roots in Africa, we too must turn away from the lure of the modern world and then search the ancient sites, monuments, legends, and documents to discover our golden past. There's no better place to start than here at the Cairo Museum. Each year, many Egyptologists and other scholars bring students and tourists to this renowned location. The Cairo Museum houses the largest treasure of Egyptian antiquities found anywhere in the world. It is a repository of the remains of the pharaohs, queens, nobles, and peasants who created one of the greatest civilizations on Earth. It has artifacts, monuments, statues, and mummies dating back to the dawn of history. In this storehouse of antiquities, visitors are awestruck by the very magnitude of the Black genius of yesteryear. But let us not get ahead of ourselves. To provide the full story, our journey must begin where the human race began, in the very heart of Africa. On the cover of its issue of January 11th, 1988, Newsweek magazine carried a painting of a young Black couple flanking the biblical tree of life. The picture was captioned, "The Search for Adam and Eve." Newsweek has revealed what many scientists and scholars now believe, that Africa was the birthplace of the human family, that the first members of what we now describe as the modern human race were Black Africans, and that all human beings around the world share common roots in prehistoric Africa. In other words, we all stem from the same African family tree. For millions of years, the human race appears to have evolved in Africa, and for over 100,000 years, the only people on Earth appear to have been Black Africans. These ancient people migrated throughout the African continent and made many discoveries along the way. They learned to domesticate animals, to cultivate crops, and to build shelters for protection against the elements. They also organized themselves into families, clans, and tribes. During what is called the Pleistocene Ice Age, which ended about 10,000 years ago, the region, which is now referred to as the Sahara, had a climate much cooler and wetter than it is today. This part of Africa was covered with grasslands and forests, as well as a number of lakes and streams. Lions, hippopotami, and other animals roamed the land, which was also populated by a highly advanced Black people whose prehistoric rock paintings, still visible today, provide a clear image of life during that time. By 8000 BC, the once fertile region, which we call the Sahara, had dried up, and most Black people who lived there migrated toward the upper regions of the Nile River in the interior of Africa. Other people, also fleeing the spreading desert, traveled farther south or headed northward in the direction of the Mediterranean Sea. By the 4th millennium BC, or even perhaps much earlier, Black people who had settled along the Upper Nile, just south of the land that would later be called Egypt, appear to have founded the country of Nubia, which also came to be called Kush and Ethiopia. Most scholars believe that it was about this time that the early foundation of Nile Valley civilization was laid. Let us see for ourselves how this great civilization was born in inner Africa, evolved, and then flourished when Black men and women ruled the world. The Nile River, rising out of the interior of Africa, rushes down the mountains on its journey to the Mediterranean Sea. On its way, it carries precious fertile earth, which it deposits on its banks. For a few miles on each side of the Nile River, there is a green belt that quickly melts into the surrounding desert. As we have noted, About 8,000 BC, people began migrating toward the Nile and ultimately drifting into and settling its fruitful plain. An ancient and proud people who would build a great civilization, who would create an empire that would extend into the interior of Africa, engulf Asia Minor, embrace the Middle East, and influence the entire Mediterranean world. These ancient people would build monuments of great magnitude and splendor, monuments that would be the envy of the ancient world, monuments that would serve as the blueprint and foundation for modern civilization. They also invented law, mathematics, science, writing, music, and agriculture. Who were these people? Where did they come from? Strong evidence indicates that they came from the south, from a country through which the Nile flows, from the land of Nubia, or what we call the northern Sudan in Africa today.
Nubia is not widely known in the world today, but in ancient times it was well known and highly respected. First, the Nubians stated emphatically that Egypt was one of their colonies and that the ancient Egyptians derived most of their culture from their Nubian ancestors to the south. In other words, the Egyptians were merely Nubian people who had migrated northward and settled along the lower Nile River near the Mediterranean Sea. Secondly, when the ancient Greeks came on the world stage thousands of years after Nubia had been founded, they showered these Africans with praise. Aeschylus, Sophocles, Euripides, Hesiod, Herodotus, and others described the Nubians as pious and just, blameless, powerful, and the most beautiful people in the world. This glowing praise led African-American historian William Leo Hansberry to conclude that
it can hardly be denied that Nubia, or Ethiopia, must have been a very ancient and yet very virile force in order to have so firmly impressed itself on the consciousness and memory of peoples so far removed from the heart of African climes.
Modern evidence appears to confirm the tradition that civilization traveled northward from Nubia into Egypt. Skulls and skeletons unearthed in Nubia and Egypt are of the same or similar African racial type. Some of the most ancient paintings and drawings of Nubians and Egyptians also depict them as a distinctly African people. Furthermore, it appears that Egypt's political structure and divine kingship were modeled after the Tasseti dynasty of Nubia that predated the founding of Egypt by over 200 years. In other words, there were pharaohs ruling Nubia long before Egypt became a nation. Some scientists insist that pyramid building also began in Nubia and was refined and perfected after the Nubians moved northward and settled in Egypt. Even mummification appears to have started in Nubia and to have spread northward into Egypt 500 years after it was invented. Nubia was also considered the land of the gods and the spiritual home of the Egyptian people. Perhaps that is why the chief beneficent gods and goddesses of Egypt, such as Osiris and Isis, were depicted as blacks.
this concept of Nubia as the great mother culture of Egypt becomes more credible with each passing day. For example, a team of scientists headed by Egyptologist John West and geologist Robert Schoch has concluded that the Great Sphinx and the large temple complex surrounding it are at least 9,000 years old and may be even more ancient. These scientists also believe that the Sphinx represents a black king who ruled a civilization in the Nile Valley that predated Egypt by at least 5,000 years. Was this civilization the original Nubia or Kush that was so widely venerated in the ancient world? We do not yet know. However, surveyors are aware that there are thousands of archaeological sites and at least a dozen cities that lie beneath the sand just south of Egypt, where ancient Nubia once thrived. If a mighty black civilization did indeed exist 10 or even 15,000 years ago, does this explain why widespread evidence of prehistoric black people has been found in Europe, Western Asia, India, China, and the New World? Moreover, does this account for the fact that the word Kush, which as we have noted, was another name for Nubia, was also a designation for certain people and deities throughout much of the ancient world and survives in many places outside of Africa even today? Gradually over the centuries, Egypt and Nubia became separate and distinct rival nations as Nubia lost supremacy to its former colony. But remarkably, even in its weakened state, Nubia often reasserted its position as the ancient overlord and guardian of African tradition in the Nile Valley. During all of her periods of upheaval, chaos, and foreign invasions, Egypt was rescued and reunited by powerful black men from the Nubian south. This was true of Mentuhotep II during the Middle Kingdom. It was true of Ahmose I in the New Kingdom, and it was true of Pianki during the 25th dynasty. Although not all scholars agree, the weight of evidence points toward a black origin of Egyptian civilization. Gradually, of course, Asians and Europeans began settling Lower Egypt near the Mediterranean Sea, and ultimately mixed with the native black population. Nevertheless, Egypt's physical, cultural, and spiritual roots stretched southward into Nubia and the interior of Africa. This no doubt explains why in later years, visiting Hebrews, Greeks, Romans, and others described the ancient Egyptians as black-skinned with woolly hair. The distinguished African-American historian, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, captured the opinions of the ancients when he wrote, "We conclude, therefore, that the Egyptians were Negroid, and not only that, but by tradition they believed themselves descended, not from the whites or the yellows, but from the black people of the South. Thence they traced their origin, and toward the South in earlier days, they turned the faces of their buried corpses." Dr. Du Bois might have added that the ancient Egyptians called their country Kemet, which many scholars have interpreted as the Black Land, or Land of the Blacks. Now that we have learned about the origin of these ancient people, let us see how Egypt became a great African nation. Because of the surrounding desert, Egypt was shielded from invasions for hundreds of years. During that time, various people who occupied the Nile Valley began working together. The Nile overflowed its banks every year, so controlling the river was important if the people wanted to successfully grow food. The Egyptians first formed villages that cooperated with each other. Cooperation led to organization, and organization led to their building a great nation. A little over 5,000 years ago, another important step took place. At that time, the nation was divided into two lands, Upper and Lower Egypt. A black man, Narmer, united the two lands. This followed a war in which Narmer's troops defeated Asian immigrants who had settled in Lower Egypt. Narmer became the first pharaoh or king of Egypt following the great kings of Tasseti in Nubia. This pharaoh began the rule of what is called the dynasty, which is a line of kings and queens of the same family. Narmer had a glorious reign of 62 years. One of his greatest achievements was diverting the Nile River and creating the delta, where he built the city of Memphis. Little is known of the pharaohs who followed Narmer during the first and second dynasties prior to the Golden Age. Some of them, such as King Kasakam and King Baa-Aneter, appear to have been stern and powerful men. During the reigns of these pharaohs, Egyptian society evolved into classes. First, there were the peasants or laborers. Then came the builders, artisans, jewelers, and other skilled workers. After them were the warriors, priests, and officials. Finally,
there was the pharaoh or king. The women of ancient Egypt were also an integral part of the society. Many of them engaged in the same labor that men did, and they had equal opportunity to own, manage, and receive property. There were also many prominent women in ancient Egypt, some of whom reigned during the Golden Age. The most renowned Egyptian women ruled during the Middle and New Kingdoms. A few were even as powerful as the great pharaohs themselves. Other women were content to exercise their influence behind the throne. Let us move ahead now to the Third Dynasty, which begins the Golden Age. By this time, Egypt was well on its way to becoming the extraordinary nation it was destined to be. Many of its achievements were staggering. For example, Imhotep, the brilliant philosopher, architect, and scientist, also became the true father of medicine. He preceded Hippocrates, the noted Greek physician, by thousands of years. Through the influence of Imhotep, the Egyptians developed antiseptics, vaccinations, and advanced surgical techniques, and they found cures for numerous diseases. In short, the Egyptians laid the foundation of modern medicine. The ancient Egyptians also now appear to have developed their own legal system with scribes and judges long before the nation of Greece, which was once thought to be the seat of Western law, was born. What is more, the ancient Egyptians invented the hieroglyphic writing system. They produced the first instrument that was used as a clock. They created the first calendar, and they introduced to the world the concept of dividing each day into 24 hours. They also developed the first advanced agricultural system and produced the basic architectural designs that are still in use all around the world today. Ancient Egypt's medical, agricultural, and architectural accomplishments certainly suggest that this was a nation with a high regard for knowledge in general and math and science in particular. Ancient Egypt's most remarkable achievements in the area of construction and design appear to have been the pyramids. These ancient structures are among the greatest marvels ever built by humankind. First, there was the step pyramid of Saqqara, built by Imhotep during the Third Dynasty. This is the oldest large stone structure in the world. Originally, other buildings and courtyards were constructed near the step pyramid, and this entire complex was enclosed by a wall 1,500 feet long and 900 feet wide. Today, however, the only prominent remaining structure is the step pyramid itself. King Sneferu of the Fourth Dynasty built the so-called Bent Pyramid several miles south of Saqqara. This structure has no steps, but it is straight-sided except for a change of angle in the middle. Then there were the three pyramids of Giza, the largest and best preserved in all of Egypt. The most prominent of them was the Great Pyramid, which was built during the Fourth Dynasty for the pharaoh Khufu, whom the Greeks later called Cheops.
The area covered by the Great Pyramid is large enough to hold the cathedrals of Florence, Milan, and St. Peter's in Rome, as well as St. Paul's and Westminster Abbey in London. There are about 80 pyramids remaining in Egypt and 100 in Nubia, or what is today the northern Sudan. Although scholars differ regarding the purpose of these ancient structures, it is widely believed that they served as tombs for ancient Egyptian royalty. We have looked at the black origin of the ancient Egyptians, and we have spoken of their major achievements. Now, let us turn to the pharaohs who governed this great nation during the Golden Age.
There were many rulers of the Third Dynasty, the most prominent of whom was Zoser. During his reign of 19 years, Egypt's borders were extended into the interior of Africa. Copper mines were exploited in the Sinai, and extensive construction took place. The Fourth Dynasty, which began about 2600 BC, also brought forth a line of great black pharaohs, some of whose names we have mentioned. Sneferu was a distinguished ruler who successfully defeated the Libyans and Nubians in battle. Following his military victories, he was kind and gentle to his subjects.
His successors were Khufu, during whose reign the Great Pyramid was built, Dedefre, whose pyramid was erected north of Giza at Abu Rawash, Khafre, builder of the second Great Pyramid, and Menkaure, whose spiritual temperament prompted many to worship him as a god. The first four dynasties of ancient Egypt represented a time of unprecedented splendor and glory. It was the technological high point of the black race. The fifth and sixth dynasties still witnessed Egyptian supremacy in the ancient world, but a gradual decline set in that would pick up momentum at the close of the period. The names and personalities of the fifth dynasty kings remain a mystery because many of them are only known by their statues.
Yet it is clear that a number of these rulers were both efficient and adventurous. For example, they formed strong navies that braved the seas and spread Egyptian culture abroad. This has prompted many scholars to ask, during the course of their long history, did the ancient Egyptians sail to the New World before Columbus? The Egyptians had sturdy ships that could have made the journey. Numerous sculptures and figurines with African features have been unearthed in Mexico, Central and South America. Mexican pyramids have a number of similarities to those of ancient Egypt. Also, there are at least 60 identical customs that have been discovered among the ancient Egyptians and the early Native Americans. Furthermore, many Indian traditions tell of black people who settled the New World in ancient and medieval times. Finally, some scholars believe that the ancient Egyptians may indeed have influenced the development of the Olmec civilization, which began near La Venta in southern Mexico around 1200 BC.
The sixth dynasty spanned a period of 155 years. It marked the first time that large numbers of regional governors began to break away from the central rulership of the pharaoh to independently control their own territories. One of the most prominent pharaohs of the period was Pepi I, who quelled internal strife and strengthened the monarchy. His son, Pepi II, shown here as a child, ruled Egypt for 94 years, the longest reign in world history.
The death of Pepi II was followed by the decline of the sixth dynasty and the ultimate collapse of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. On the basis of current evidence, this marked the end of over 1,000 years of African splendor, the zenith of black civilizations, the world's first golden age. There were, to be sure, other great periods to come.
During the Middle Kingdom, from about 2130 BC to 1786 BC, a long line of black pharaohs, including such figures as Sesostris III and Amenemhet III, reorganized Egypt and reigned in an age of prosperity and stability. The 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom stretched from about 1550 BC to 1307 BC. Here again, a distinguished line of black rulers, whom some scholars have called the greatest family in world history, brought new grandeur and vitality to Egypt. Ancient Egypt's final days of glory were during the 25th dynasty, when such great Nubian pharaohs as Pianki and Shabako reigned supreme.
But as great as these later dynasties were, their foundation was laid during the Golden Age. Let us now review how it all happened, how Egypt came to be a great African nation.
First, black people from various parts of Africa migrated to the Upper Nile. There, they founded the nation of Nubia, or Kush. Then the Nubians moved down the Nile and ultimately settled the land that was later to be called Egypt. They made many contributions to Egyptian civilization, including the divine kingship, mummification, religious customs, and perhaps even pyramid building. In time, however, Egypt evolved into a separate and distinct nation in its own right, a nation that laid the foundation of world civilization, and most especially, a nation that provided the roots of Black history and culture. Egypt's great and ancient legacy remains with us today. This architecture, this science, this agriculture, these hieroglyphs, this legal system, these pyramids, these pharaohs, and these queens are the great heritage of Black people everywhere and have influenced the evolution of civilization around the world.
One of the most remarkable facts about the study of history today is that most authorities suppress, distort, or ignore the achievements of Black people in antiquity. Yet the record reflects that these achievements were widely known and acknowledged by a number of ancient people. In this vein, the distinguished author Flora Lugard has written, "The annals of all the great nations of Asia Minor are full of them. The Mosaic records allude to them frequently, but while they are described as the most powerful, the most just, and the most beautiful of the human race, they are constantly spoken of as Black. And there seems to be no other conclusion to be drawn than at that remote period of history, the leading race of the Western world was a Black race." Similar sentiments were expressed by Marcus Garvey, one of the greatest Black leaders of the 20th century. "Every student of history, of impartial mind," he wrote, "knows that the Negro once ruled the world." In our continuing effort to reveal the hidden history of the Black race, we focus on the Black woman in part 2 of this series. Our second tape is entitled, "The Daughters of Isis, Black Women in Antiquity." It too is accompanied by a supplemental booklet. This concludes part 1 of the Clegg series, "When Black Men Ruled the World, Egypt During the Golden Age."